Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We start the session after lunch. The topic is protecting of IoT from new threats of connected reality. For this, we have a chairperson, Mr. Arun Narayanaswamy, Senior Director, R&D, VMware, right? VMware. He is the Senior Director in R&D, VMware India, and where he bridges business and technology. After 2 decades of building cloud, security, and storage products for enterprises and governments, he is currently working on VMware's IoT and edge products and solutions. He is passionate about education for everyone and contributes to the cause through VMware Foundation. May I have you on the dais, please, Mr. Narayanaswamy? Now, can I call upon the panelist, Mr. Bapu S. Bindhumadhava? Can I have you on the dais, please? We've all had lunch, so can we have a louder clap? Thank you. Mr. Amit Rao. Mr. Divyanshu Verma. And Mr. Sandeep from Subex. Mr. Narayanaswamy, I'll request you to take over the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. While that's being loaded, let me introduce the panelists. First, we have Mr. Divyanshu Verma, who's a Senior Manager, Intel R&D. He's also the Vice Chair of OCF in India. He's an alumnus of IIT Delhi and IIM Bangalore. He has over 19 years of experience in technology, along with 4 years working abroad in US and Europe. He is currently responsible for leading connected home products at Intel. Thanks for joining us, Divyanshu. Next is Mr. Bapu Bindhumadhava. He's Senior Director and Head of Department at CDAC, Center for Development of Advanced Computing, Government of India, based out of Bangalore. He heads the real-time systems and IoT activities there. He has more than 30 years of industry and IT experience. He got his degrees from Bangalore University, NIIT, and BITS Pilani. And he's got a long list of journal papers, publications, and conference proceedings in his illustrious 30-year career. Welcome, Mr. Bindhumadhava. Next, let me introduce Amit Rao, who's VP of Strategy and Business Development at Trusted Objects. It's a France-based headquartered organization which focuses on IoT security solutions and services. Amit is a tech evangelist with a lot of knowledge in the semiconductor and the high-tech domain. And he has taken on multiple business roles over the years. And he's been with ST Microelectronics, Texas Instruments, among other leading companies in this space. And he believes that data security is what we need, not just what the people here in the room, but the entire world. Welcome to the panel, Amit. Next, I want to introduce Mr. Sandeep Naganur, who is Head of Strategic Partnerships at Subex. Sandeep heads the initiatives around IoT security for Subex. And in this role, Sandeep works with businesses to outline and implement IoT security solutions and services related to that. He's got a lot of experience in the field of consulting and in this field as well as in consulting. and um, he focuses on working on resolving threats and as well as trying to stay ahead of hackers and geopolitical agents that are trying to take over our world. Thanks for joining us, Sandeep. So with that, okay, you can see that. Thank you. With that illustrious panel, I would like to get started with this session. I know this is the session right after lunch, so I would not mind if I heard any yawns, but don't be loud. So what I do at VMware, so VMware is traditionally a data center virtualization company. In the past few years, we have been focusing on researching on IoT. So my role at VMware is focusing on building IoT products. Particularly, I work on a product called Pulse IoT Center. Would be better, yes. Yeah. So what I do at VMware is focusing on Pulse IoT Center. It's a product that focuses on managing and securing IoT infrastructure, regardless of whatever hardware, operating system, or vendors, products, or whatever IoT application that uses the data from the hardware. So that's my focus, and even though I am in R&D, I spend quite a bit of time meeting customers and partners, and a lot of what I've learned over the past 3 years, plus some of the latest developments, is what I want to start this panel discussion. We'll have in each of these panelists have some special messages and data to share with all of you, and then we open it up for questions from the audience. Sound like a plan? I think IoT is here to stay. In fact, it's while some of us might think that it's just starting, it's the need for IoT is not some purely technical. It's not that I want to get my jollies by building some new gadget or technology. It's the drive for all of us to innovate, and whether you are in a city where we keep cramming more and more people into these cities and with less resources, and I'm from Bangalore. In fact, all of the panelists from Bangalore, so we all understand how cities are now getting crammed, and there is a huge need to optimize all of this. Now, the other side, the amount of land that is available for agriculture is reducing, but then one good statistic is that the world hunger numbers have actually reduced in the past few decades, which is good, but then we also still have more mouths to feed, and the amount of wastage in terms of food is also gone up. Regardless of all of this, we need to produce more food with less land, and this is another of the challenges that's around us. Last but not least is, of course, the roads. So any economy needs people to move, whether within the city, around the world, and this is a big problem, not just in cities, but everywhere else. And moving these people in a efficient way is something that's important for the globe today. Now, all of this deals with the fact that it all starts with data, and data itself is evolving in terms of what it means to us today. Number one, the sources of data is exponentially growing. It used to be a small set of people adding data to the internet, to once the social media platforms came, it's everybody in the planet, every human in the platform, in the planet. Now we have the situation where it's a lot of these devices and these devices are also growing. So that's one of the big macro changes. Second change is, it's not all happening inside a data center. It's happening out in the real world, the physical world. And being able to capture this data, protect it, make sense out of it, and also keep it safe is a big challenge. And so the where it's produced and the sources of production, both are increasing. Third, it's the consumption of this data is also not humans. It's actually computers. And more recently, about a year ago, you must have been following this AlphaZero. Anybody here heard of AlphaZero? So this is a program that Google built. It's a chess program. And the way they taught this program is to play with itself. And less than 24 hours of playing with itself, this program was able to beat all humans as well as all other chess programs in the world. And looking at some of the moves that this program has been making, grandmasters like Gary Kasparov, it's like, I cannot imagine a human thinking of this. So this is how that machine intelligence is actually changing or looking at new ways of doing things that a human cannot even fathom or understand or even think of, at least in the current state of how humans have developed. So this is changing drastically. And obviously, this is all great opportunity, whether you are applying this from a security perspective, whether you're applying it from efficiency of how we consume to creating new sources of revenue. This is one of the things that IoT is getting a lot of mentions. People are not, IT revolutions were incremental changes, incremental things that could reduce the amount of expenses you spent on IT budgets, versus IoT is changing fundamentally how business is run. This is the big change about this IoT, and it also goes beyond just enterprises. So last week at Davos, this was mentioned as to that IoT deployments are key to some of the key sustainability developments that the goals that are and these are, I mean, it's kind of, if you look at those 5 goals, sustainability goals, it covers almost anything that you can think of that's important for the world today and for the next few hundred years. How are we going to say no to this? So we absolutely need IoT, but then it also has its challenges. Over the weekend, how many of you know who's the father of internet? No, it's not a politician. So it's actually a bunch of people in DARPA who actually put together the protocol, the IP protocol, etc. So, but one of them is this person named Vint Cerf, who right now works at Google. So over the weekend, he wrote this article in Business Insider, where he outright says that it's software. IoT devices run software, and software has problems, and we have been dealing with this over decades. Now, the only difference is some of these issues could be very innocuous, but as turning on or not turning on a light, but some of them could be very disastrous, whether it's a car that's going and killing a pedestrian or anything else when it comes to a smart grid or a train or any of these things where the impact is a lot bigger than whether a light is on or not. Over the past few decades, so before we get into Internet of Things, let's just understand our world of Internet of People. And when I say people, it actually represents the laptops and mobile devices, because these are all associated to a human. So this is the Internet of People. And these 3 companies, I mean, I'm sure every single laptop or mobile device in this room is captured, is managed or runs one of these 3 companies' software. And they have a very good mechanism of updating it, fixing it. Last week there was a vulnerability in Microsoft, and Windows and Microsoft updated a patch, and as humans we actually made sure that that was installed. Who is going to do that for IoT devices? The lay of the land is very different. These devices are not associated to a human. It's probably somewhere sitting on the ceiling of this room, or some other, let's say a weather pole sitting somewhere that's out in the ocean to send somebody to go update it. And many of the times it doesn't get updated. And there are other issues related to IoT of devices. There's no standard operating system. There's no standard, there's so many vendors. There's very less support for hardware support in terms of the protection that it can give you. So this obviously has increased the surface area of attacks, and you must have heard of all these different attacks, including the one on the last. This is on the Wi-Fi network. This was figured out in 2016, and I'm sure more than 80% of the Wi-Fi protected access-based Wi-Fi access points in the world still not patch this. So they are still vulnerable. If you want to take a minute and turn off your Wi-Fi on your mobile device, now is the time. And rightfully so, everybody is worried about it. And as this particular survey at RSA conference shows, so people are worried about it, but they just don't know how to approach this. And because the problem is not simple. It's not what you used to do for a laptop or a mobile device. And the threats itself could be of multiple types, ranging from the distributed denial of service, that was the Mirai botnet attack of 2016, to various kinds of eavesdropping, whether it's a state player or is it an individual company or just a hacker having nothing better to do. So all of these threats are real, but let's also look at it from the legal and compliance perspective. Actually, some of our panelists will talk more about this. How many of you have a fast tag to go through the tolls? So do you know that you probably connected it with Paytm? Okay, so now not just the highway authority, but Paytm also knows where you have traveled, and based on what timestamps you actually touch different toll booths, they can calculate your average speed. And without even putting a single traffic police on the road, they can send you a fine, ticket for a fine. And this is actually happening in some countries, like in the United States. You get speeding tickets, so people actually take stops before they reach the next toll booth. What is the legal ownership of that data? Who owns it? Does Paytm own it? Does the highway authority own it? And what purpose can they use this for? Do we have the right legal framework? Do we have the right oversight for some of this? This is still evolving. It's IoT, all the time. Technology improves very fast, but then infrastructure and legal usually takes time to catch up, but we got to do this, and there's many such different things that are happening today. So there are so many, as I highlighted a few earlier, so there are many different aspects of why it's so difficult to secure IoT device. And you see all these different things that are very different from what policies you apply to secure a physical security to a computer security or a mobile device security. And over the years, a few structures or frameworks have evolved, and one of this is something that has evolved. And so this is, again, can be applied to almost any aspect. And number one is making sure that you have the least privilege. Interestingly, Well, I'll get to that in a second. Micro-segmentation is making sure that even if one of your IoT device is compromised, it doesn't compromise the rest of your systems. This is what happened at Target, where the AC system was hacked, and from there, hackers could get to the credit card system and stole all the credit card data. How can you box up different networks so that even if one is compromised, another is not compromised? Everything is not compromised. And not just looking at preventing, but also assume that so as people say, there are only two types of companies in this world. One is a company that knows that they are already hacked, and the other companies, they just don't know yet. They're already hacked, but they don't know yet. So how do you detect these attacks and not do a once in a month or a once in a year audit, but actively looking for this and reacting to it? And building a end-to-end, so this is from the hardware all the way up to whatever solution is delivered, and some of our, I think Amit is going to talk more about how this is done today. Of course, making sure all of your software and all of the associated devices are all patched, firmware, software, everything. So this is what I wanted to use to just set the context for this conversation. There's more to hear from our panels, and I'm going to welcome Mr. Bindhumadhava to give the next talk.
Good afternoon, and thanks for the chair. So my counter starts now. Right. Okay. So this is a very important topic. I think from morning I was sitting on the other side of the table, and I was trying to understand. There are two things here: protecting IoT and connected reality. So basically, there is a device, so which is interconnected. So that's all is the story. So basic thing is always cyber security or protection becomes very, very important when the devices penetrates, or the IT penetration into a physical world. So that's how the whole story is. But from the morning I've been hearing IoT means, some people say it is yes mobile phone, it is laptop which is coming into a network, or any other device which is coming into the network. So till today we have been talking more on the consumer space of IoT, what is being taught. That's what my understanding was. And suddenly people switch to the next generation. They say, no, IoT is going into critical infrastructure. So there is a paradigm shift of saying that IoT is being used in critical infrastructure. And then subsequently there are some sort of soft sensor things where we gather some information. So there is a social IoT part. So today what we are trying to see is the combination of consumer IoT, IIoT, and a social IoT, how they, if they are all interconnected, if at all, if it happens, and if there is a complex problem which has to be solved, how this will be visualized. So is it very specific to this particular platform what we are talking, that is a combination of consumer IoT, where IIoT also is connected, and a social IoT also is connected. So this is the basic stack, because I always get confused when I say that it is a device which is connected to a network and the network which is connected to an enterprise. The enterprise can be a cloud also. Then slowly people start talking about, no, there is a fog in between, okay, so, or an edge in between. So this is nothing new. If a person who has worked in automation space, already these layers are all taken care, especially if you are in a control system software or a process industry. Only one difference is basically there we are operating on what is called as an intranet. Here we are going to operate on internet. And the other paradigm shift is the instrumentation, which was taking around more than 60% of the space in terms of revenue, and 40% on the other control software and other things. There is a paradigm shift of 3070. So that means the devices and the instrumentation today, if you use some IoTs in the process industry, the cost comes to around 30%, whereas the other layer, especially the analytics and other things, cost 70. That's all is the paradigm shift which has taken place. One is from intranet to internet, and then subsequently the cost factor from instrumentation, which was more than 60%, it has become 30%. That is the half of the thing. So automatically there is a lot of activity going above the layers. So these are some of the, because it was connected, I thought that we should see what are the connections. These are some of the basic things which are connected, and these are wireless, which comes to a gateway, and you are going to push this after basic computation or raw onto an enterprise or a cloud, whatever it is. What next? The rendering has to be done in different form factor with the user experience coming into the place. So this is the holistic thing. So what are the security issues which are involved in different portions of this particular thing? So if you see, there are different communications which are being used, and then it is wired and wireless. So automatically there are some issues which come into the picture. That is just to set the context. So actual thing is, this is the layers which are there, and the vulnerability is at different layers. I think the chairman spoke about this particular thing. So we start from wireless sensor space, which is called the perception layer, where it is more of physical attacks, DOS attacks, routing, and data in transit attack. So basically, it is a device plus the device which is connected to these technologies which will be looked into. If you go above the perception layer, the transportation layer, one is the access, because what is happening is there is a lot of things which are spoken about the access network, and what are the protocols which are involved in this particular space. And next is the core network, and then subsequently the other things and the application which come into the thing. So here basically the physical layer which converts into data, and data is relayed to different level, and processing is done at different levels. So I think this was covered just to give a glimpse of saying that just telnet itself, there was some sort of 75% issues which were there. Can we sort of seen from what are the things which are there? These are some of the top 10 malwares in the IoT space which are there, and of course the top one happens to be the IP camera attack which is there. Now what are the things which are there? Physical attack, because we are talking IoT as a device, so it should be tamper proof. That is a basic thing. Suppose you don't connect to any of the thing, it is like our EVM machine which is not connected to any network, to say that it is a foolproof, tamper proof device. So we should be able to sort of give that thing. When it comes to the transport layer, there are multiple issues which are there, which is generic to any interconnect. So these are some of the space. I think these were also put in the last this one. The other thing is data storage. I think VMware goes with virtual machines. So what is, there is some sort of a ownership shift from one VM to the other. How is this inter-VM, this one handled? So the other thing is the resource denial of service, where there is a command which has to go, and if it is into a physical device, or where you are going to control a physical network or a physical system, how is this particular being there? One major thing issue is basically there is number of devices which will be connected on a IP space. There is a issue on the DNS attacks which are very, very prominent. So we have to see how this DNS attacks will be sort of taken care. So this is one of the major thing which is to be looked into. So these are some of the, at different level, there is nothing new. I think any cyber, this one, all these things are taken care. Only thing is, it is being addressed at different level, and mostly the disaster recovery or the major impact which is created by any device which is in the network becomes at most important. So IoT happens to be one of the device which is closer to the physical system, where the command and control can be pushed onto the as low as the IoT device, which can be a control network. So how do we do some sort of a threat modeling? So because the next space is when we come and say that there is a security, there are three things. One is basically the infrastructure security, where all these devices get connected, interconnect. So how do we take care of the infrastructure security? The second thing is the information security, where we tell, yes, this device has to authenticate. So the third one is the application running, whether this application running also has to have application security. So these are three different securities which has to be looked into. So the idea is basically to come out with a test bed. I think in the morning somebody was telling how do you sort of see that if there is a interoperability issues which has to be met, how is this taken care? Whether it will interoperable issues are there or not. If it is homogeneous, there are no issues. The idea is to sort of have a heterogeneous platform. Obviously, there will be an issue of the interoperability which has to be taken care, and there should be some sort of a test bed which will compliance testing can be done and taken forward. So that is the idea. And the second thing which is at most important in this particular space, space is the trusted management which has to be there. There should be a trusted platform, so that any incoming device, it comes in first, and then you should be able to validate and take it forward. So there is something called as zero knowledge protocol, which is being extensively utilized, and then subsequently it will be taken forward. So the conclusion is every stage the IoT layer stack is vulnerable. So there is one or the other security threat which is there. So you should be able to sort of see that you should be having some sort of a red and blue team which does the attack, and you should have some sort of a mitigation, and you should have a test bed for trying to simulate the whole thing. So the simulation or the test bed should have something called as a live, virtual and construct sort of scenario, so that we can get the real time effect, because we are talking of using this platform onto a critical infrastructure or a process control industry. So you should be able to simulate, emulate and have a live system. So it should be a combination of these. So this is what I wanted to sort of put forward in this particular thing. Thank you.
Okay, so 20 billion connected devices by 2020, that's Gartner for you, and I saw 50 billion, so I think Cisco is a bit more optimistic about it. Then we have about 250 million connected vehicles on the road by 2020, just end of next year, and 24 billion connected M2M, machine to machine by 2024, right? That's the figure now. If really IoT has to achieve that kind of scalability and sustainability, more importantly, there are three impediments that people talk about, and as per the research, security is one of them. And you won't be surprised if you see this chart. This is the World Economic Forum talking about the top 5 risks in terms of likelihood. And this was 2018, by the way. The 2019 report just came out 4 days back, and it hasn't changed much, which means that the cyber attack and the data fraud or thefts actually figure in the top 5. And by the way, they also figure in the top 10 likelihood and also in terms of impact. So they are in terms, risk in terms of impact as well. So now, why are we talking about this? Because 30% of the total cyber attacks that are estimated to happen in 2019 will be on IoT. That's about 300,000 attacks that will happen or occur on IoT networks just this year, right? So what's changing actually? And the facts are that Most of the IoT devices out there are 16-bit microcontrollers, pretty constrained on the hardware and the software. So the traditional IT security doesn't really work, number one. Number two, there was a report that just came out from CPX 360 in Bangkok just last week that if you need to wage a cyber attack, the cost has gone up 52%, which means you have to shell out 1.1 or in excess of $1.1 million, right? And look at what's happening in IoT. I personally know of 2 companies in India who have launched IoT exploitation kits for less than $150, right? So, given the fact, don't be surprised that you get to see new variety and a lot many IoT attacks coming up this year. So, welcome to the future, or the future shock, as you call it. What are the new trends here? Because of the facts that I stated, the trends are there is a multi-stage attack trend that is coming. What is multi-stage attack? A very good example, just a few months back, a big casino got hacked where all the data of the higher owners, which is all the information on their financials, was siphoned off from secure servers using, guess what, a fish thermometer, a fish tank thermometer. A thermometer was actually used, which was connected to the net to siphon off all the financial data, right? So it's called multi-stage attack. So what are we talking about here? So till date, the kind of attack or the class of attacks that we see have exploited essentially, one, the security flaws. So you're talking of unsecured hardware, no passwords, no encryption, outdated components. We are talking of devices which are not really configured. We are talking of very low interaction between the consumer and the settings of the device. And that has really resulted in situations where the devices have been hijacked. And what are the devices being used for? Essentially, to spread malware, create them into botnets, which go and do DDoS, or what they essentially do is they go and then extract the data, or can do a misrepresentation of a data in terms of a false positive or a false negative, as we call it. So manipulate the data essentially. So that is what they do. And what are the kind of trends that we'll get to see? Well, they have really evolved in terms of sophistication now, right? So now these malwares are really learning and adjusting, and what they're trying to do is now from a one-trick malware converting into a multi-platform malware, which can actually organize a paper install campaign, right? So with that, you really need to have an end-to-end solution, and end-to-end is the operative word here. And like I mentioned earlier, the traditional IT security does not really work. So you might have a firewall, you might have an intrusion detection, which is very good, which is required and part of this security solution. But this actually starts from the hardware or the security devices, right from the supply chain, right? Because one of the other trends that we've seen coming up is attack on the supply chain, which is part of what we call as the life cycle attack, right? So life cycle attack is nothing but attack on the supply chain, and it is also exploiting the vulnerability that the device has in the field when a patch or an update is thrown to it. So if you look at this diagram, which is from IoT Analytica, you will see that the user here could be a person, it could be a device, it could be a system or an application, which is interacting with the gateway and then to the cloud, and then there's an overarching layer of lifecycle management. So let's start with the device quickly. So device is both the hardware and secure software. When we talk about hardware, like I said, secure the supply chain. You need to have secure programming and provisioning, which comes from a hardware security module, which will then securely inject the keys in the hardware, which then has to be shipped to the OEM, and corresponding whitelist needs to go over VPN to the cloud server. That's number one. Number two, you need to have a tamper-resistant platform. It could be TPM, it could be a UICC in case of 3GPP, it could be a secure element, and then we're basically talking about encryption, right? So we move on to the secure communication part of it, where all the data on the medium needs to be encrypted, right? The other important aspect of this particular end-to-end scheme is that the device in the field needs to communicate with the server and not the other way around, because there are a lot of vulnerabilities, and I think there was one specific slide on the telnet port which contributes to almost 75% of the hacks, which is a big problem today, can be handled. And then you have the secure cloud, where you have a necessity to have integrity, number one. Number two, identification, authentication, and of course, encryption. Now, when a human is interacting with a machine, you normally have a HMI, right? And then you can either do a OTP or you do a biometrics, which is part of the two-factor authentication. But in a real-life scenario, in IoT, machines talk to machines. So how do you do a two-factor authentication or something that is really secure? And that is where the digital certificates really come into the picture. And they really enable the authentication and identification of the devices and the data. So now, like I mentioned, the life cycle management is an overarching layer which actually covers the devices, the communication, and the cloud. So what it essentially does is, it does two things: monitor the data, and I think Sandeep here is going to talk about how ML heuristic and signatures today are being used for doing intrusion detection. You have firewalls as well. And then, of course, you need to ensure that the security of the device out there in the field are up to date. And there has to be a secure way of getting that update or a patch to that device through FOTA or firmware over the air. Now, this is undergoing a big change. And the reason is because of the economic potential that IoT holds, and because security is one of the impediments. There are a lot of standard bodies that have now started talking about standardizing security. While we are grappling with the issue of standards, it's a good move to actually also include security as part of it, and I think OCF is doing their bit on it, and we'll probably hear more about that from Divyanshu. So there is NIST, the authority on security, talking about standardization security. They're talking about consideration for a secure and security and privacy of IoT. Then there is ISO IEC JTC1, the standard body, which is actually coming up new standards for IoT security and privacy. There are a lot of industry standards that or bodies you can refer to. You have IoT Security Foundation, you have OCF, you have the Industrial Internet Consortium, you have OTA or the Online Trust Alliance. There's a Cloud Security Alliance. So there are a lot of data available, and you can look at some of the best practices, but we will probably wait for a ISO IEC JTC1 recommendation to come in soon. Now, self-assessment apparently hasn't really worked well for the IoT industry, right? And I think this is a very positive move forward. What we're essentially talking of is standards, regulation, test, and certifications. And here are some of the leading examples that we have here. So all of you are aware of GDPR that came in last year. So there's something called IoT under GDPR or labeling program that is coming up in the European Union, where there'll be 3 or 4 level, which is still being debated, by the way, as we speak. And there'll be something out by 2019, end of 2019. There is expected to be regulation where each device or IoT device that needs to sell in the European Union will have a label saying that, okay, this many star rating for security. And this is precisely what is required. California also, by the way, came up with something similar. So they have some basic countermeasures that they've built in to ensure there is a basic level of security in the devices being sold in the state of California. One good thing that I would specifically like to mention, and probably the biggest cause, yeah, I'm done, this is the last slide. So one of the biggest reasons why you see hacks happening is 54% of IoT devices today don't have basic security. And what is that? They don't have a provision for a password, or they don't even have encryption, right? So the state of California legislation specifically states that the first time the user uses an IoT device, he has to change the password, because it will not have admin and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the default one, which is apparently for 62% of the devices out there today. Talking of, and this is the last point here, 2 big developments on certification by authorities. One is the Cyber Shield program in the US, where they want to go on similar lines, labeling IoT devices. They will probably have a star rating for that. CTIA is the first entity in the US, which is a telecom body, which has come out with a cyber security certification. But this is still limited to LTE and Wi-Fi. But this is a very positive development, and probably some of the other entities will take note of that. With that, thank you very much. And we at Trusted Objects have a mission to do end-to-end security. Sorry, I couldn't cover too many points here, but if you have anything to discuss, I'll be available offline. Thank you.
So good afternoon all, and not a penalty, but I think a lot of things getting repeated, so I'm fine with that, and we'll try to wrap it fast. So quick introduction, and I'll go to the next slide. So this is, in whatever gizmos they're talking, this is what it is. Manufacturing, completely controlled from where you don't know. Home, how built, who built it, you don't know. The food getting served, you don't know because you ordered on a Zomato and it came to your home. This is Amazon Go. This is the future. All DDoS attacks, all VoIP attacks, all RSA attacks. Here. Why I'm showing it? Because this matters to us. Telnet protocol, which I'm an electrical engineer, probably doing for like 20 years, matters to me, but not many of my friends sitting outside there. But this matters to each of us. That's the problem. So that's why when you implement IoT in your home, and I was going around, and I see 60% of the companies talking about home automation, actually I was worried about each home. I was worried about each home because airports are secured by CISF, and borders are secured by BSF, but homes are secured by us. And we are going to put things there which we don't know. What's that? There's no source code available. And now bulbs don't come in a socket, they also have a chip. And the chip has a firmware. That matters to us. That's why IoT security is very, very important. Very quick introduction. Each of you can find something which you are dealing with now. Virtual money, I think it's not come, it's going to come. Phishing attack, every day in Times of India can figure it out that somebody sent a mail, somebody clicked, and a person in Ghaziabad or Muzaffarpur in Bihar or Northeast got cheated. That's the problem, because everybody has a smartphone, everybody, banks have given it out. The security out of that is missing at all. Everything is related, but there is no security which is related to that. Finally, if you see shopping online, right? Every now and then there is a news that somebody else's credit card was used. Why I'm putting this picture at a very high level is because all the gizmos and all the protocols that we talk results into everything that we do every day in, day out. That's why IoT security is important. So this is a little bit of gizmo. DDoS, very familiar name in the R&D community. But I'm telling you, next year, you can ask a 6-year-old kid, he will tell you there was a DOS attack in the home. That's the way it is multiplying. It's multiplying faster than we think. Fork bombs. Right now, I will ask for, I think people in the research community will know what is forking, but none of us will know that. But believe me, in next probably 18 months, you'll say my home is fork bombed. The way I got phishing attack, my home got fork bomb. Fork bomb is what? You start creating processes that takes up all the resources. Now where it hits you? It hits away because my 72-year-old mom has to maintain a particular temperature for a cool breathing. If the AC doesn't work properly, there's a fork bomb there, I'm worried. I was not worried earlier because my AC was not controlled by the app. But now every AC company shows on television that there is an app that you can control your AC from probably 20 miles away or whatever miles away, right? That's the problem. And the irony is we don't have standards. If there is a standard that, okay, this computer is built on x86 architecture, I can go and work on that. But if this computer and that computer and that computer and that computer is built in different architecture, we have no control which one to control, which one has a flaw, which one doesn't have a flaw. So idea is, I'll talk about it because I'm representing OCF. We should have standards. We should have standards for security. We should have standards open so that when the manufacturers or device manufacturers or ODMs do that, as a consumer, I understand what they have done. That's very, very important. Very simple thing. I think each of you do shopping, right? HTTP to HTTPS. S was security there. Because the message that was going on did not have encryption. Any sniffer could have captured that message and got our password or whatever details we are sending. So this is other area where the protocols, TCP/IP, OSI, or where I work, the different protocols, 802.11ax, etc., designed long back, not with the mind of security. They were designed to give access to as many people as possible. Now the flaws in this protocol, one Arun was showing that, crack attack, I worked on that actually to figuring it out. Every Wi-Fi home, every Wi-Fi router at each home has that problem. Because this protocol was designed probably 20 years back, WPA2, and we are still using it. That's the problem. So we definitely need research from community, from CDAC and all, to look into these protocols and take it, see that it makes sense or not. Quickly show you, this is what it is. The whole traffic light of the city monitoring can go away. That's it. It's not to scare you, but to give you a perspective that if a traffic light can go away, the home lights can also go away. This was, sorry, okay, I can skip this slide. Now what OCF is? OCF is Open Connectivity Foundation. It prints up standards. Why standards? Because standards matter to us. It comes with this like 1.0 security draft, which if the manufacturers are taking those devices, making the devices and making OCF compliant, we as a user will know that this is like ISO compliant. So it's gone through certain tests, certain parameters which you can trust on. So as an end user, we should talk about this, that if I buy this device, is it OCF compliant or not? Very small thing, I'll just skip it because in the interest of time. This is one thing I want to show. This was 9/11 attack of DDoS. If this amount of data gets pushed to any device, believe me, it's the hospital or the airport will crash. This is the simple thing, an IoT attack called Mirai bot. To see the infection, you can definitely see India coming out, being marked in different colors. So it's not happening somewhere else, it's happening with us as we talk. Just putting in perspective, Digital India going on, we should be aware of that. Now this is not thing, this is us. How do we communicate to machines? Industry 4.0, there was a talk yesterday. Sudhanshu, my friend, is sitting there. I think he gave a talk. The human, when they interact with machine, if there are no standards, we are not things. We are Internet of human beings. When we merge up with machines, and if we don't have standards, there is a risk for each of us. Because this chip is going to be implanted in probably 10 years, because we cannot cope up with machine otherwise. So I think in the interest of time, I'll keep it short and sweet. Thank you for your time. There's a lot to talk, but it's a very important topic. And each of us as a consumer should be aware that this makes sense to ask some tough questions to the manufacturers. Thank you.
Guys, I don't have it. My presentation. Sandeep. Hello everyone. Probably in the meantime, I'll get started. Yeah. All right. Thanks, Arun, for the kind introduction. And thanks to my panel, I've got a lot of interesting pieces covered already, and time also. So in the interest of time, I feel like a student who has 5 minutes to go, and I have about 20 marks in my head. I need to put it in paper, so I'll quickly get started. So what I want to talk about is security trends. My friend Amit spoke about a lot of security issues and how you know what things look like for the next for the foreseeable future. So I'm going to approach it with a different perspective. So before we actually talk about 2019, I want to talk about what was predicted for 2018 and what exactly happened. Right? That is something we would want to know. So these were the top 5 sort of trends that were predicted. We had ransomware, cryptocurrency-related threats, small-scale, so read that as small-scale intrusion attacks, and then regulations and data protection privacy. So these are the things that everyone thought the IoT world is going to talk about and act upon in the year 2018. And this is how it panned out. So ransomware, about 42% of organizations in the world were affected. And this is definitely a very conservative number because most of the organizations do not come out and accept the fact because, an obvious impact to the reputation and things like that. Cryptocurrency-related threats, the market sort of started crashing in the first half of the year, first quarter of the year, but still there were a lot of guys probably had good amount of fun because there's still something going on in that, and you could see it went up by about 4,000% as compared to 2017, and because of that, it is probably one of the most seen issue all over the IoT world. And then the small-scale intrusion one. So the example that my friend Amit mentioned about the connected aquarium, as he rightly said, it was a temperature sensor, and things like these, everyone neglects them, right? No one really wonders how something like this could become a big issue. And then regulations. Again, California became the first state in US to come up with a law that mentions that by 2020, most of the IoT vendors should have a reasonable amount of security in place. While there are definitely detractors who say that this is not good enough, I think as being part of the security world, we believe this is a small step in the right direction, and that is important, and that will get everyone talking, and we should move ahead and make more amends to that. Data protection and privacy. GDPR was implemented 25th May, and a lot of industry folks had very little time to abide, and there's still, I guess, most of the industry is still learning. And I think we got to know about Google getting fined about $58 million last week, so which means even the giants are still trying to grapple with this. And then more local in India, Justice Sri Krishna committee has submitted a report on this, and we are hoping it's going to be passed soon. Again, it may not be wholesome, it may not be comprehensive, but small steps in the right direction is all that matters. Coming to 2019 now, these are the top few things that we're expecting. So again, regulations, there should be more effort put in, and there should more work happen this year. Data poisoning. So this is a kind of trend that we are expecting to see where a lot of MI and ML and AI, everyone's going gung-ho about it, and how hackers or systematic approaches can poison the data, changing key facets of the data and making decision makers go by whatever is being proposed by these models. And then, so zero-day broadcast race. So the security world is, there's a rat race where everyone wants to identify issues that have never been identified before, and then tell everyone in the world that we have this competency, we are the first ones, this is what we do. But what that happens is, a lot of time they don't take care that the affected systems have already been patched, and other people in the world who are using similar technology are also vulnerable. And when they go out and broadcast this, it's a free market for hackers, right? So that is going to happen, but I guess, Amit and I, we belong to the security world, and it's a responsibility all of us have. So we have to tread, we have to be cautiously optimistic and make sure while we broadcast our competency to the world, we don't end up impacting our customers. ID spoofing to gain control over bots. There are chat bots and different kinds of bots for everything these days to make things easier, simpler. But hackers are going to make use of this and misguide, misrepresent, and misuse the information and with the customers. State-sponsored attacks. As they say, the next world war is not going to happen with arms and ammunitions. It's going to happen with systems, desktops, laptops, tablets. People are going to sit in their comfort of their home and run these attacks. So that is something we all need to be aware of. And there are already a lot of things that are happening in US and around the world that are being reported. And I guess many of those things are not getting reported at all. So that is something that we'll see. Banking, financial sectors. So banking section is definitely trying to sort of revolutionize how banking is done, with facial detection, people having to do everything right from their drawing room to get everything done, even from the smallest to the biggest transactions. And 5G is upon us, and one of the major use cases for 5G is IoT. And then security to, sorry to
interrupt. Can we wrap it up with this slide,
sure,
if you don't mind?
Security to become a key differentiator. Everyone's going to come out and provide different kind of services. If you have security, people are going to like you. I'll just quickly take about 10 seconds for the next few slides. So you see all those issues, right? It does look bleak, if you would say, but it's not really that much. So we have, how do we safeguard? We have emphasis on security by design, collaboration, co-creation. Players need to work together. in-depth vulnerability assessments, identify issues, fix them before you go live and impact your customers, constant monitoring and proactive patching. Even if you have everything fixed on day one, things are constantly evolving, so you need to be ahead of it with monitoring and patching. So this is the cyber resilience model that we propose: discover, protect, monitor, respond, recover. There are different facets to each one of this, and this is what we propose, and we work with our customers. And this is my final slide. So this talks about our solution, which is Subex Secure. We work with customers globally. We work with governments, defense establishments, smart cities, telecom operators, and this is what we have. We have 3 layers of detection, and we are all these different modules rolled into one. So I understand because of lack of time, I've been very quick, and so we have a booth in Hall 7, I think 7816, if I'm not wrong, that's the number. Please visit us. We can continue this conversation. I'll be happy to engage in a more detailed conversation about our abilities, and also to how to approach the IoT security problem in general as being part of this ecosystem. All right. So thanks for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandeep. And apologies for all the panelists who kind of short-circuit the time. Just to summarize, I think we probably heard a lot of threats and bad things, IoT devices, if they are left unsecured, what they could do. So IoT in general is like fire, so you can get a lot of use for it. However, it also comes with responsibility, and as we learn a new tool, we also need to learn new techniques to protect it and benefit from it without being marginalized or add new liabilities to ourselves. Thank you for listening, and I'm sorry we don't have time for questions, but we'll be available outside if anybody want to discuss anything with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we close this session, I would like to request a chairperson, Mr. Narayanaswamy, to give out mementos to our esteemed speakers. Mr. Bapu S. Bindhumadhava. Mr. Amit Rao. Mr. Divyanshu Verma. And Mr. Sandeep from Subex. Now may I request Aarti from Exhibitions India to present a memento to our esteemed chairperson, Mr. Arun Narayanaswamy.